Hi everybody, my name is Shay Quinn. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am wanting to talk about my spiritual journey, how religion has kind of played in and out of that a bit. And yeah, I'm actually really excited to talk about this. I feel like, for me at least, I haven't had many people up until I think a bit more recently to have like really candid conversations about God and spirituality and religion. And yeah, so I'm just really excited to kind of talk through where I'm at right now. By no means do I think the way that I'm doing it is the perfect way or the right way for you, but it's been really helpful to kind of hear other people's stories for me. And so I just wanted to kind of share my own and take with it what you will. So I think it's helpful to kind of just, I'm a very contextual person, so I like to give context whenever possible. And I think it's helpful to kind of talk about how I grew up. So I grew up in a Baptist church, and I also went to the same, or a Baptist school that was like at the same church. And for those of you that maybe aren't familiar with Baptist teachings, it can be pretty strict, I guess. At least that's how I always felt growing up with it. Very black and white, very focused on the Bible and kind of taking things very literally. So it's like it was highly discouraged to dance and I don't know, I'm sure there's other things, but I'll put a link in the description to kind of explain what people who practice in more of that Baptist faith believe in. So I always felt like I was trying to follow a formula, that there was this perfect way to practice religion, and I really consider that more of a religion, not really focused on spirituality, at least for me in that time. So there was always a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things, and there wasn't anything in between. So it was very black and white. And like I said, I always felt like I was trying to follow a formula of, X plus Y equals Z. And if you don't get that formula exactly right, you're going to hell. Or, which sounds pretty intense, but that's what it felt like. It's like if you miss one little thing, you're going to be wrong and you're going to go to hell. And everybody who is currently missing things, you have to evangelize and preach to them and tell them about this. So that way you don't go to hell and they don't go to hell. So it was definitely in my opinion, like a fear-based way of learning about who God was. And so yeah, that was tough. But for my personality type, I've always been such a people pleaser, always wanting to do right, that there was some comfort, I think, in that of like, okay, there's a formula. If I do X plus Y, then it'll always equal Z. And so that I feel like kind of was a double-edged sword, and I'll kind of talk about that a bit more, but there was some sense of comfort there of like, okay, like, I can do this, I can follow these rules and do things right, and if that's, what it takes, and that's how God will love me, that's how I'll get to go to heaven, things like that. In my growing up, I definitely had glimpses of who God was in my life, where different situations or things that would come up where I really did feel the presence of God, and I feel like I got a glimpse of who He was in that time. But I think in that time it was often stifled by religion and, again, more of those like black and white rules and kind of ways of looking at things. So when I got a bit older, I did go to a Christian school that I think did have Baptist roots, if I'm remembering that correctly. So, but it did seem a bit more relaxed than kind of the school where I grew up in. It seemed a little bit more like easygoing, I guess, if you will, in comparison. And at that point, I had gone to church pretty much my whole life. And especially as I got older, I just never felt connected to people in church. Like I always, would go on Sundays. I even helped out as being a youth leader for middle schoolers for quite some time. And I used to look around and think, man, like I'm just missing something. Like all these people seem like they're super connected and have like really good relationships. And I just could never get truly connected with people. Looking back, I think a big reason for that is I am a very, I like having really deep and meaningful conversations and connections with people. And I felt like I could never really have that safely with anybody at church. And I think a big reason for that is because we were taught, that things were either right or wrong. And so if I was struggling with something and I was doing something that was wrong, I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody else in the church about it because it's like, man, they have everything together. Like I can't disclose or share that, I'm actually really struggling with something. And I'm not trying to say that all churches are like that. It's just been the churches that I've been exposed to and experienced even up to this point where I've felt that way. And even with some of the people I did middle school youth group with, like who are other leaders, I've kept in touch and stayed really close with a couple of them. And since then, we've kind of stepped outside of the church a bit, and we have conversations all the time of like, oh, you were doing that in that time? Like, so was I. I just thought that I was the only one. And I thought that if we talked to each other about it, it just, we'd get kicked out of church or we'd get kicked out of the youth program because we weren't doing everything according to what we were taught and we were doing it wrong. And so I think looking back, it makes sense why I never felt connected. I just never felt safe or comfortable to actually share the truth and reality of what was going on in my life because I feared that I'd get kicked out or be really judged. And so that's kind of been my church experience, I guess, to this point. I've been heavily involved. I did choir. Like I was very involved, yet I never felt authentically connected in any way in that church environment. So it's also important to note that my husband kind of grew up very similarly in that same religion, kind of practiced the same way, was taught the same way. And when we got married really young, and we just kind of talked a lot about it and felt like we both felt the same way, where we just neither one of us ever really felt connected to people at church. And so in that time of getting married and establishing ourselves, we decided, you know what, we're not going to go to church. Like if we're not getting any value out of it and we're just going to say we went and to kind of like check something off a box, like what's the purpose of that? It didn't make any sense to us. So in that time, we stopped going to church, and since then haven't gone to church. We've really surrounded ourselves with a lot of different people that are super cool. Some people that share that same religion that we grew up in, some that don't have a religion anymore or, practice anything. And I think that having conversations with all different types of people that are genuine and authentic and real has been way more helpful to me. And I don't want to speak for my husband, but I think both of us in our relationship than going to church ever was or ever would be. And so we have really close friends that we've shared really, deep things with, and things that have been hard for us, and being met with such love and empathy and understanding and no judgment has felt really good. And that's something, again, just in the experiences that I've had with church, I haven't been able to find that. And actually stepping away from church and kind of having that in a more organic way has been really helpful and really beneficial. So over this last year, I really started to kind of wrestle and think through how I was raised, the religion that I was raised in, believing that Jesus died on the cross for my sins and that he rose again, and we're all sinners, and through Jesus we're made new. That's, like basically the gospel that I was taught growing up. And so I just had experienced a lot of hate and judgment and things that just intuitively felt so wrong to me, that I've always struggled with and had disagreements on. Some of those things that I've always struggled with and not agreed with, feel deep in my gut that I just have fundamental issues with, are gay rights, people who are gay, things I think kind of just that really rigid mindset of there's a right way to do things, there's a wrong way to do things, there's nothing in between. Just that idea has always just felt icky to me. And I know in the church, how I was raised, the response to that was always well, it's just because that's the world talking, that's your flesh talking. It's not because there's actually something wrong with the way with what we're teaching or the way we're teaching it. It's more an issue on you that you have to work out with God, because kind of something's wrong with you. At least that's kind of how I always felt and took it. And so in the last year, I really kind of stepped back and looked at that and went gosh, there's so many things in the religion that I grew up with that I just can't get behind, that I just don't agree with. I had a really resentful and bitter taste in my mouth about the hate and judgment that I experienced. And I feel what I experienced is probably very minor or minuscule in comparison to what other people have experienced. And the fact that I still felt that way and still felt really judged and hated, or felt that hate, was just kind of an indicator to me of something's not right here, and I need to kind of think about this more. And something else that kind of sparked this in me is actually watching, this is kind of funny, but watching, I think it was on HBO, a documentary about Stargate and kind of that cult experience, and watching it, just making a lot of connections of whoa, how I was raised had a lot of those similar tendencies of kind of blindly following a leader, trusting people, not really having the room or space or freedom to kind of talk about issues with the ideology. It was kind of always just taught no, this is the truth and you can't question the truth. And so that also kind of opened my eyes ooh, we were always taught, that other religions were cults. And it's there were just a lot of similar tendencies that I saw. And again, this is just from my experience, not trying to, put any religion down or experience. It's just, that's how I felt. And so that was, again, something that kind of prompted this kind of searching and looking into how I was raised in that religion a bit more. And in this time, I really just sat in asking questions and being okay with not knowing the answers. Just asking, wow, what if all this stuff that I've been taught about this specific religion isn't true at all? What if we're the ones, or I'm the one that got it wrong, and, potentially there's no religion, potentially there are different religions that actually are true, that I'm the one that got it wrong? What if God isn't real? What if God isn't around, or all of this that I've been taught is just something that was made up, and something that isn't actual reality? What does that look like? What does that feel like? What would that mean? And so I just sat for several months in these questions, and I didn't put pressure on myself to try to figure it out. I just felt like I really had to step away from what I had known and just kind of look at it from a different perspective, kind of almost I have imagery of trying on different shoes for a little while and seeing what those felt like and sitting in them and kind of getting to know them more before, making a decision or, kind of I don't know, I just gave myself time and space to kind of just ask those questions, sit in them, talk with people who didn't grow up the way I did in that religion, and ask them questions, and people that did grow up who don't practice that religion anymore, ask them questions. And so that time it was a little scary because it was like rocking my world of like questioning stuff that I always saw as being the absolute truth. And it just shook that up a bit, and it was like, woo, this is scary because this is different than what I've known and what I've been taught. And it felt really nice to not have that pressure of like feeling like, okay, I can love whoever I want, which sounds kind of weird, but I feel like that was always like preventing me, or having that religion so strong always prevented me from just loving on people in genuine ways. Because in the back of my mind, if they didn't practice my religion, I would always be thinking like, oh, I really want to love them, but like, I know they're probably going to go to hell, or I know that, you know, what they're doing is a sin. And so like, oh, like I don't want to get too close to them because, you know, maybe that will like rub off on me. And I know, especially to people who haven't been in an organized religion like this, that might sound super weird. Like that might sound like, how and why would you think that way? But that's literally what I was taught, is that people that didn't share the same belief system or values, like they almost were looked at as being dirty, or like they couldn't really add value to your life because they practiced a different religion or didn't have a religion. And that you kind of had to be careful and cautious of them, and you couldn't really fully love them, because if you fully loved them, you would just be preaching to them all the time and telling them about God to save them from hell. And so I recognize that, and especially now looking back, it's like looking back and thinking that I had that mentality and way of thinking seems so foreign and weird. But that's really what I was taught. And so it was just kind of unlearning a lot of that in that time, and feeling the freedom to love people and to not judge people and not think, oh, they're sinning. It's like I felt like I could finally approach people in the way that I always wanted to, of just loving people for who they are, meeting them where they're at. And it just felt really good, and it didn't feel forced. It felt natural. It felt easy, and it just felt really good. So like I mentioned, I sat in this space of just kind of questioning, asking questions, having conversations with people for probably about a year. And then I had bariatric surgery in March of 2022. And it's really interesting because since having my surgery, I'm just about 3 months post-op, a little past that now. I feel like that was just the catalyst of a lot of different areas of growth in my life. And I'm still trying to kind of like understand that a bit more. But after having bariatric surgery, I really feel like I started to experience God in like a real way. And I didn't think I'd get emotional with this video, but here we are again. I think I get emotional because how I've experienced God in the last 3 months looks and feels so different than how I've experienced Him throughout my whole life. And I think just I'm in a season of my life where for so long I've lived in the knowledge and like the book knowledge of many different things. And since having bariatric surgery, I feel like I'm finally getting to experience those things. And one of my oldest and dearest friends, Taylor, we've been best friends since we were 5. And she put it in a really good way that resonated with me, where she had said to me, you know, I can know you and know about you, right? I can, she was talking to me. I can know that, Shay was born and raised in this place on this date, and, these are the things she likes. These are the things she doesn't like. And she said,
it's another thing to actually know who you are and experience you and experience you in a relationship. I can know a lot about you, but it doesn't mean that I actually know you and have a relationship with you. And she was just saying that that's how she's experienced it with God, where how we were both raised, it was very rigid and black and white. And man, we knew the Bible. We memorized Bible verses. We knew all of the Bible stories. And yet, for me, I had never truly experienced who God actually is. And what I believe is that He's not somebody who hates and judges. And yes, there is a righteous anger, but that comes from a place of love. It doesn't come from a place of hate or wanting to push us down or keep us down or see us make mistakes and fail. That's not where it comes from. And experiencing God for me has just felt and looked so different than how I viewed God before. And again, this is just my experience and my opinion. But I think I just felt, before experiencing God in what I consider to be a real way, I just felt really alone. Like, am I the only one who's struggling with this? Or like, seems like everybody else has it figured out. Like, what's wrong with me? Where's the malfunction in my brain and heart that I can't connect with God? And it's just interesting that when I stepped away from that rigid way of thinking, from that black and white mentality, that's where God showed up for me. That's where He met me, and that's where I've felt the most connected to Him and to other people in my life, whether they're Christians or not, like, or believe in God or not. It actually hasn't mattered at all. I've been able to experience love and safety, and it's just interesting that that's where God met me and where I got to, I feel like, for the first time, meet Him. One of the experiences that was really impactful after my surgery was with another really good friend of mine, Brittany. Shout out, Brittany. We've been best friends since 8th grade, so we've known each other a long time. Again, grew up in the same religion, and we've just had a lot of history together. And she has been on a similar journey as me, where we've had a lot of really great conversations and about this topic. And one night I went over to her house for dinner, and it was after I had had bariatric surgery. Like, I think I was maybe a month and a half or so post-op, and she had cooked me dinner, and we just chatted, and we were having a good time. And she's always been one that is super perceptive and can kind of just like key in to who I am, to what my heart is experiencing, even before I'm like consciously aware of it. And she was just saying, like, man, like, you just look like you're weighed down, like, and you look like you're heavy and that you're carrying a lot. And we had a really great conversation that led to her praying for me. And you know, I've had people pray for me before, and it's always just felt like, oh yeah, people are saying words and kind of like wishing good thoughts for me. And it hasn't felt like bad. It's just, I guess it's felt like people are just saying words, and I don't really feel or see an impact of those words. It's just kind of nice thoughts. And it was such an authentic time of her praying over me, and it was the first time I was connecting my physical body, or my physical body was making a connection with something spiritual and something that was outside of, I feel like, the physical realm. And I felt tingling in my body. I was getting very specific, like, images that were kind of, like, I know they weren't just me thinking them up while she was praying, because they didn't have anything to do necessarily with what she was saying, but after talking with her about it, it made sense why those images were coming up. I had phrases that were kind of getting placed on my heart. And since that time, I feel like it just opened a pathway to hear God in really cool ways and in authentic ways and real ways. And since that time, for me, how I feel like God has been communicating with me is through phrases, where it's almost like, the best way I can describe it is like, I'll get songs stuck in my head, where it's like I'll hear a song and then I get certain lyrics that just kind of like stick there, that go on repeat, and I kind of, sing them throughout the day. That's almost what these phrases feel like, where they come at, I would say, like, random times, I guess, or times that, like, I'm not expecting them, I guess is a better way of saying that. So it'll a lot of times be like when I first wake up, or sometimes like in the middle of the night, I'll wake up and have these phrases. And I've shared a couple of them on my Instagram, but like one of them was, in the stillness is where I find you. And again, and it just comes in as that phrase, like, that's not like how I talk. I wouldn't think to say something like that in my own head, if that makes sense. And another phrase was, you were never designed to fit in a box. And so anyway, when those phrases come, they really stick with me. And then I notice, sometimes like I'll have that phrase and then I think, oh, I don't really understand what that means, but like, okay. And then I kind of move on. And then a certain person I talk with or a situation will come up, where that phrase comes back and it has meaning and applicability. And so that's one way I feel like God has been communicating with me. Another way I feel like God's been communicating with me is by giving me specific like images in my mind. And the best way that I can describe it is almost if I like close my eyes and I think back to like a memory, and I can picture it like, that one time I went to the beach, or the one time I went to Disneyland, and I have specific images and memories from that trip. That's kind of the same feeling or way that I get images from God. And sometimes the images will be of me doing something, or if I'm like in the moment with someone, I've had like imagery of like just like hugging them, or and usually like when I get that imagery, like I'm like, can I just give you a hug? Or like sometimes it feels almost like I'm compelled to act out that image, I guess. Or if I'm praying with someone, like sometimes I'll get phrases like, they are so loved, like tell them how loved they are. And so I try to do that. And so that's just like how, in the last few months I've been experiencing what I attribute to God. And it's just interesting because not once in that time of where I feel like I'm really experiencing God have I felt the pressure or need to like condemn people or I don't know, like share the truth with them. Like how I was growing up, I know I talked about this, but it was always like, you can't, like you always have to have the agenda of preaching the gospel to someone. And I always took that as I have to tell them about Jesus, and I have to be very literal about it. And reflecting on all of the stories of Jesus and what I was taught growing up, he never did that. Like, he never went up to people with signs and said, hey, what you're doing is wrong. He would start by having a relationship with people. And he would approach people not from a place of telling them what's right and wrong, but from a place of like, hey, I want to know who you are. I love you, and tell me what's going on in your life. I want to know who you are and understand why you feel the way you do and what you're doing. And I feel like that's how God has shown up in my life and approaching me that way. Again, more in the last few months where I've felt that, of not judging me and saying, wow, Shay, like, you're an idiot, or you're stupid for thinking that way, or why did you do that? That was such a dumb mistake. That has not been the voice at all from God. The voice has really just been, I love you. I love who you are. And I want to get to know you. What do you enjoy? What are your dreams? Oh, you have that idea? That's so cool. It's been met so much with that attitude and approach. And it's made it easy for me to finally like rest and settle into that approach with other people. And that's felt so good. That's been, that's who I've always been. I've always loved people and connecting and having deep and real and meaningful conversations and connections with people. And I feel like now I have the freedom to do that. And it feels so good. It's not my job to try to convert people or try to steer people into a specific direction. That's God's job. Like, all I get to do, and it feels so freeing, is just ride the wave with that. And how God has shown me that genuine love and connection, I get to just share that with other people. I get to ask them questions and get to know who they are and love them without judgment or thinking, what they're doing is wrong. Like, I don't have to do that. And it feels really good. And I've seen that happen too, where in the past I just used to get so caught up in saying what was right all the time. And oh my goodness, I need to make sure that I, say this exact thing right so it resonates with people. And if I don't, then I'm failing at what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's like, no, like, I'm just gonna go with what God is prompting me to do in the time. And it's okay if I don't say all the words right. Then even this video is a perfect example. Like, I had bullet points of things that I wanted to cover, but I didn't practice this. This is very, obviously I wouldn't have practiced crying. In how I used to do things, I would have liked it to be more polished and put together. And that's not real though. That's not who I am. That's not who God is. And so it's just felt really good. And there's been so much peace and enjoyment and fun actually in that experience. And I remember I used to, as a kid, and even like in my adult years too, like, I used to hear people say like, oh man, having a relationship with God is so much fun and so exciting and exhilarating. And I remember thinking like, no, it's not. Like, it doesn't feel very fun or exciting to me at all. Like, I just do this because this is the right thing to do. It's not really that exciting. And I don't know if those people really were experiencing God or they were just saying that, but like, I just remember thinking that of, it's not fun. And now in the last few months, it's like, whoa, if this is what experiencing God is, it actually is really exciting and fun. And I never know in the day, like, the people he's going to put in my life, or the conversations that will come up. And that is exciting. And it feels like an adventure, and like, wow, there are so many cool things to look forward to. And something I was talking about with a couple different people recently about was, for so long, I viewed myself in these different compartments. I had physical Shay and cognitive Shay and emotional Shay and religious/spiritual Shay, and all these different boxes or compartments of who I was. And I would always focus on these compartments individually. So I would be like, oh man, physical Shay is a bit rough right now. Like, I need to pour in all time and energy into her and focus on eating better, working out. And then when I would do that, it would be like, oh shoot, but now spiritual Shay is kind of lacking. So I need to focus on her for a while. And I was exhausted all of the time. And of course I was like, that's so much to manage. And now I don't feel like I'm in these individual compartments. I feel like I'm Shay. I'm who God created me to be, and I'm settled in that, and I'm rested in that. And all of those other compartments I had, those are just different aspects. Those are just situations and environments. And I get to show up being who God created me to be in all different scenarios with different people. And I don't have to change that. And, it's not always easy to do that for me, especially when there's pushback or there's things that kind of like, attack me or come against me in the way of thinking through, having thoughts that are lies, really, lies that you're not good enough, and, this doesn't make sense. And even getting prepared for this video, when I wrote my outline of just like thoughts I wanted to get across, those lies came into my head of, wow, you're going to like stray people away from knowing who God is because you said you didn't feel connected in church, and, you're wrong, and, all of these thoughts. And those are lies. Like, God has shared with me that those are lies. And so one of the things that I've been trying to do is, when I have those things that come up, I just try to ask him, Lord, like, what's the truth then? Like, these lies feel really real. And they're trying to prevent me from, doing something, in this case, doing this video. Is that the truth, or is there something else? And I just know for me, when I've asked that, he's always answered in different ways. Whether it's through somebody I talk with, whether it's through a phrase or images, he always answers and tells me what the truth. And with this video, the truth was that I was supposed to do it, and I was supposed to be honest and share my experience and how I'm feeling, and not, try to speak on anybody else's experience except my own. And so that's what I've tried to do. And, even in this, I still have that urge and that need to, when I'm editing it, like, oh man, I need to make sure that I clean it up right, that I, communicate everything that I was supposed to. And even right now in that time, I'm hearing the Lord say, like, it's my job to do that. You're the one communicating things, but I'm the one that makes the change and shares it with people who need to hear it. And that's not my job. So that feels good. And with that, I hope that whatever is supposed to happen with this video happens. And I'm just grateful that I was able to be a small part in that. So with that, if you have any comments or thoughts, feel free to share them. And I know everybody's in a different place in their life, a different path, a different journey. And I just wanted to share where I'm at, and that's where I'm at. So I hope you guys enjoyed it today, and I'll see you in my next video.